Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com. Hello and welcome to SciTech Culture, the show where we discuss science, technology and culture in its myriad of forms. My name is Ben Warner and I'm joined once again by my good friend and colleague Steve Kern. How are we today, Steve?
I'm good, thanks, Ben. Hello, everyone. I'm feeling very nostalgic.
Yeah, it's something that's crept into our these episodes we're doing at the moment. But we thought we should have a discussion about how I guess today's blockbusters are trading on our nostalgia, and obviously some recent examples of that we'll refer to are the new Star Wars movie, The Force Awakens, and also Jurassic World had a fairly big impact there in that they're probably the two top films in terms of financial clout for 2015. And what's I guess the interesting thing here is that Star Wars, for instance, the new film, it's shattered box office records left, right, and center. It's reignited the audience's passion for what is probably the biggest franchise in history.
Yeah.
And gotten everyone psyched and everything. Critics seem to, even though it's fairly highly rated on the tomato meter at Rotten Tomatoes, there's a very distinct line coming through from critics saying that it is completely derivative and unoriginal, that it just rehashes the same plot points as the original films did. It doesn't offer anything new. As a side thing, Jurassic World almost fit into that sort of problem as well. It traded on Jurassic Park's, or our knowledge and nostalgia for Jurassic Park when it came out 20 years ago. And the idea is that they're coasting, basically they're making, Hollywood is gaining success basically out of coasting on the positive memories of the original films, rather than actually using these films to create something or to give the fans another dose of what they like, but to also take it into new territory, which is, I think, what they used to do. But now it seems like they're not even bothering. They're just putting what worked before into it, put it in a rinse cycle, and then just spat it out, and it's and everyone loves it. So
yeah.
So what do you think about that, Steve?
Well, I think it's interesting. I think the nostalgia angle is really important. These films are being made for the fans. Now, in terms of art, to regurgitate what you've already done and serve it up probably isn't that good, but the fans really want this. And the difference is, when it comes to these nostalgia films, is compared to, say, the ordinary sequel, is when you normally get sequels, and they're in close succession, because the films we're talking about today, are 20 years, 40 years apart. So, but when you have your normal sequel, it comes out a year or 2 years after the last one, and they basically just serve it up and ram it down your throats, and everyone goes, oh, the sequel's never as good as the original, and that's just the way it goes, and people don't like that. But both these films were hugely popular. They really ignited people's imagination. They were both groundbreaking. Before the original Star Wars, we'd never seen fights in space, lasers, lightsabers. We'd never seen that sort of stuff. Before Jurassic Park, we'd never seen dinosaurs come to life. And that's what the public loved. And they probably weren't that great in terms of their filmic sense, although Star Wars arguably is a great film. Mm. Maybe Jurassic Park wasn't, but people want to go back. They want to relive their childhood. 20 years on, you've got kids and you want them to love what you loved at the same age. And I think, while I'm not a big fan of the fact they're just remaking something that happened earlier and pretending it's new, I think there's a place for it.
It's interesting that they've gone down this route. I guess in a business sense, it makes sense because doing what works is more guaranteed to sell tickets and get the money back, because obviously they spend a lot of money on it. But one of the things that, I guess my personal experience with it, if I take Star Wars as the example, I went in. I can't say I didn't enjoy watching it, because I did enjoy watching it, because it had all the familiar elements that it's supposed to have that, I liked from Star Wars. But the minute I walked out of the cinema, I was already starting to forget everything that I'd seen. So there was nothing memorable about it. So even though I walked in and thought, yeah, that was really entertaining, I'm actually even like now thinking about it, thinking I can't remember any scene, I can't remember any line, I can't remember anything about it that stuck out as being memorable. However, if I think of the original Star Wars, any of the first trilogy movies in particular, I could probably quote some lines out of that. I can remember memorable scenes, the old I am your father scene, that sort of that sort of thing. And I don't know, I think that might be a problem for what would be considered the cultural zeitgeist. They talk about these films capturing that, like lightning in a bottle, where they capture the public's imagination. And if this type of recycled material is what is the only thing that will capture the public's imagination at this scale, we might be in for a bit of a problem going forward, because at least that's my experience. And I know in speaking to a lot of people, they've said a lot of the similar things, that it's perfectly well made. It's expertly executed. You enjoy it, and then you forget about it after it's done.
Yeah, look, it's indulgent, and you're right. Maybe you can get away with it, and this time for sure, I can't see them getting away with it maybe a third time in another 20 years. I don't know. I mean, the first three Star Wars, that's episodes 1, 2, and 3, they traded very heavily on that nostalgia. But they weren't anything like those first three films. So it's interesting. I think there was a place to remake Star Wars, maybe not quite so derivatively, but maybe there was a place for that. And the same with Jurassic World. But we've been talking lately about nostalgia. In my mind, a lot of this goes back and is no different really to vinyl shops popping up again now, and people heading down there to talk music and to flick through records and try and find something special and unique for themselves. I think that link to going back to films that you know and love will become a new trend, and we'll probably see Home Alone remade very shortly. I mean, they really tried to do it with Dumb and Dumber last year. I mean, that was another one where Dumb and Dumber 2, they tried to remake the original, and while the plot was slightly different, really the content was identical. So, I think we're in a space now where people cry out for the old days and applaud them when they see them.
What's also interesting too is that the people in Hollywood that are making these films are actually of the fan generation as well.
That's right.
Which is, I don't think, something we've had before. So if you look back to the golden era with Spielberg, Lucas, and all of those guys, they were film fans. So what they did was they took what they loved about film growing up, and then they made their own thing. But so that's where you could argue that something like Star Wars is sort of in a way based on old material, but what Lucas did was that he presented it in a way that had never been seen before, even though it was like based on a story that had been seen before. Using the type of archetypes and things like that. So those guys were film fans, but this time what we're getting now in the present day is fans of those films making films today. So instead of with all the comic book films coming out, it's no accident that the directors, the producers making those films are comic book fans, for instance. So I think that that's also feeding into it as well, that you're getting fans making the films, and they know how to deliver to the fans because they're a fan themselves. But that, I think, maybe they don't quite know how to sort of deliver something, or have maybe even the guts to deliver something that is new, that adds to the fan experience, that takes it to a different level. But it's still something that the fans want to see. And my thinking on that is how, going back to the original Star Wars films, is that the first Star Wars film and then The Empire Strikes Back, if you have a look at the two storylines, plot-wise, they're different. They're actually very different films. And today, I don't imagine that, for example, Episode 8, when it eventually comes out, I don't know how different it's going to be to Episode 7, because which in itself was also derivative of earlier films, because I don't think that they've got that. They don't feel confident enough to do that in the market environment that exists today.
Yeah, it's very interesting you make the point, especially about the fans and their level of confidence. Just as by way of comparison, I think one franchise is a franchise now that's done it quite well is within the television field, which is Doctor Who, where the classic series is radically different to the modern. But like that, the modern series is carried by the fans of the classic series. Very different, but it still obeys the laws and all the things that fans of the original show have come to love. So there is something in that, and it might be that if the larger Hollywood franchises, and films are very different to TV, you don't get as many installments or as much opportunity to build characters, but if the fans can nail what it is, they'll be fine. They'll create the story and move it along. And that's really what needs to happen, though, I think, is what we'd agree here, that the fans now, it's time to stop going over the past, give us something new.
And maybe just to finish up, that might be the point where they can actually take something from TV, because TV at the moment is sensational in terms of original storytelling and concepts. So hopefully some of that feeds back into film. And arguably TV in its current state, that's how it got to that point. It started doing some of the things that film used to do, and hopefully it'll feed back the other way.
Absolutely. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll still be buying tickets after all anyway. All right, so we'll wrap it up there, and we'll check in every now and then. I think we're probably due to do a sci-fi episode or something like that at some point, and see how we go from there, because having said all of this about derivative films, you get films like The Martian coming out, so you can't say that it's not all bad kind of thing. All right.
Absolutely.
All right. So don't forget our website, SciTechCulture.com. You can get all of our links there. You can interact with us on Twitter, Google Plus, and Facebook. So I'd love to hear from you. We've got our photos on Instagram and Flickr, and we've got our blog posts and whatnot on the website. If you think anyone's interested in watching these discussions that we have on a regular basis, feel free to send them to our website. We've got everything there, and they can check it out. And we'd appreciate that if you did. All right. So that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.